before I go on to talk about the way that mindfulness and meditation on the one hand and law on the other fit together, I wonder if there are any questions and comments about the meditation process itself. Anybody want to say something about that experience and how that felt to you, or were you able to keep coming back? The instruction, after all, there's no criticism implied for a failure to stay focused on the breath. It's an opportunity to see how little control we have over the wanderings of our mind. The meditation process is really about coming back, starting again. It seems first, I think it's. Are you an experienced meditator or not?
Not from the part of mindfulness, or not from that philosophy, but I've done it before. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm impressed by the clarity of your observations. To be able to see with that degree of clarity is, I think, impressive, and you should be aware of that. I have never had precisely that experience, and I want to stress that the experience for each person is going to be different, and that at this point you can simply live with that experience, see if it changes. See if you were meditating for 20 minutes, I wonder if that observation would continue, or that it might even flip over. But just to be aware of that kind of process is a kind of precise discrimination that I think is very helpful. And when we get to be that precise in looking at our own internal process, we can become much more precise in dealing with the process that goes on in the conversation between us and another person. So I want to thank you for the question, and encourage you to continue a process which looks with that kind of subtlety and particularity at your own experience. Any other comments from people who found that difficult for one reason or another?
Well, I just wanted to say I recognize what you said, and I think that it also, if I think, for instance, about like a yoga practice, which is something I'm familiar with, that on the in-breath it's often the open movement, and the out-breath is the inward movement. So I recognize this focus of attention.
Good, good. Some people, sometimes in the early days of my practice, I found that when I looked carefully at the times when my attention just disappeared from the room and the present, went somewhere else, it was often on the out-breath, when I was kind of relaxing inward and kind of letting down my guard. But again, I want to encourage that kind of inquiry into your own process. Good. I want to emphasize again that this is a process that is simple but not easy. And the benefits flow not from a kind of a cerebral understanding of what's being asked of you, but the benefits flow from the practice of it. We're talking about two kinds of practice, the practice of meditation and the practice of law. And both of them benefit from practice, from working at it, and not with a kind of a clenched feeling that I've got to practice perhaps the violin or the cello for the next hour. I'm going to have to stick with this. What we're trying to establish is a capacity for focused, committed effort, but in a way which is relaxed and easy. It's just as our posture is upright and dignified, that's also wholly relaxed and at ease. So when you're standing to make an argument in a court, you're there and you're fully present and attentive, and at the same time you're completely relaxed. You feel panic perhaps arising, but you felt that panic before, you can let it go. And you're just there, relaxed, and ready for whatever questions or arguments that are presented by a judge or by an adversary. So I'd like to give you a of the history of mindfulness and law as it emerged in the United States over the last 20 years. I'm fully aware of the fact that we are two radically different societies, the United States and the Netherlands. And still, I think there are things that we can learn from each other. And I'm offering our experience, which many lawyers and judges in the United States have found valuable, to you in the hope that people in the Netherlands will also find it useful. I'm impressed with the progress and success that Clarcia and Micah have had over the last 2 years in establishing a foothold for this mindfulness practice among the students at the law school and among the members of the bench and bar in Amsterdam. So it's inspiring to come back here after 2 years and find so much progress has already been made. So that encourages me to think that there are good reasons to think that there's going to be some correspondence between what we've found useful in the profession in the United States and what might be useful here. The first retreat we held for lawyers or law students was in 1998 and was held for students and faculty at the Yale Law School at a retreat center in Connecticut. We brought people together for 3 days of silent meditation practice and for discussions held in a mindful frame of mind that was shaped and facilitated by the meditation that we had done together. And from that grew a series of retreats, and in about 15 or 20 law schools in the United States, there are now courses in mindfulness and law offered in one form or another. And in an additional dozen law schools, there are mindfulness programs which aren't presented as courses, but as more informal processes for students and faculty. In these last 20 years, mindfulness has emerged in higher education, in elementary education, in journalism, in the corporate world, and in the law, among other places. Mindfulness had been something that was understood as a religious practice in virtually every religion. Meditation is a practice in virtually every religion in one form or another. Now it's being presented in a secular form so that people of any religion or no religion can all practice together. There are many different forms of meditation. The one we've chosen, mindfulness meditation, or Vipassana meditation, is rooted in Buddhism, but the religious part of the practice has been left behind, and we're looking at, instead, the ways that meditation can be beneficial to the practitioner and can also help to improve the functioning of systems and institutions. In these 20 years in the corporate world, there's been a real explosion in the use of mindfulness. Google has been a center for it. They've set up a program called Search Inside Yourself, picking up on their search business, but saying mindfulness is a way that you can use search processes inside yourself. And the other thing that's happened, well, there's two other things that are worth noting that have changed in the last 2 years. One is that there's a whole body of science that has been developed in the last 20 years to more deeply understand the brain dynamics of what's going on in the brain when people are meditating, and why meditation has such a powerful capacity to help people change behaviors that they want to change. There was virtually, when I began my practice many decades ago, I did it because I was advised that it would be important to me, that it would help me deal with the stresses of my life, and it would make my law work go easier and I could be more effective in that work. It seemed persuasive to me. I tried it on my own. It worked very well enough. No miracles, no great sudden right angle shift in my behaviors, but enough change and enough progress so that I've stayed at it for all this time. Now this is buttressed and supported by research findings which draw on the most sophisticated technology for reading brain function. The science supports the power of this simple intervention to help people to make basic changes in who they are and how they behave. And the other thing is that mindfulness has simply progressed so far. When I started doing this work with lawyers, you really had to explain. Nobody had heard of meditation or mindfulness or could think of a reason why it would be important to them as lawyers. Now they've read about mindfulness in popular magazines, in newspapers. They've seen specials devoted to mindfulness on television and the like. So there is an environment of receptivity to this. As I've been involved in this process of bringing meditation out of the cloister and into the world of active engagement over these, I guess I've been involved in that process for 30 years or so. And the changes are enormous. Still, some people, as I've moved this process along, have said, well, why lawyers? First of all, they're going to be the most stubborn and resistant people. And second, what's the connection between meditation practice and what lawyers do? And both are serious questions, and I've thought a lot about both. With regard to the resistance of legal professionals, I've run into it fairly often. There is so much in our training that makes us skeptical of looking inward. We are people who are in the business of looking outward and trying to respond to things in the outer world and to change them. But that's where our focus is. That's where our education tells us that that's where the important work is to be done. A lot of lawyers, on the other hand, are, in the United States anyway, dealing with serious stress from their work and the things that flow from stress. Ill health, substance abuse, depression. These are very common in the legal profession in the United States today. And for many lawyers who are drawn to meditation practice, it's the idea that this is going to help them manage their stress, which is going to make them feel better, and it's going to make them do their work better. Because there are very few people in any situation, law in particular, who do work better when they're under heavy stress. Some level of stress can be helpful, but the kind of stress that often accompanies the work of the lawyer, or I should say law study, some of that stress is counterproductive, and people either burn out in the work they're doing, or they leave the profession, or they succumb to some kind of dysfunctional response like alcohol abuse and things of that kind.